Welcome everyone to the daily news analysis of 4th of December 2023। तो इम्पोर्टेंट आर्टिकल हिंदू न्यूज़पेपर से पहला जो है, आंध्र प्रदेश ब्रासेस फॉर हेवी रेनफॉल एज मिचांग इंटेंसिफाइज, इंडिया डिजाबिलिटी इंक्लूजन एंड द पावर ऑफ BY by on criminalizing adultery, India will not be bound by curbs on energy use, says senior official. Israel ordered people to evacuate as bombing shifted to southern Gaza. Then India agreed to withdraw troops from Mali, says Moizu after meeting Modi. The transformative benefit of population level genome sequencing, साइंस का पेज है। देन मिथेन मोर पोटेंट लेस परसिस्टेंट, ये भी साइंस का पेज है। तो वन बाय वन देखते हैं। पहला जो है, आंध्र प्रदेश ब्रासेस फॉर हेवी रेनफॉल एज मिचांग इंटेंसिफाइज। Cyclone Michaung has intensified in its move across the southwest of Bay of Bengal and is likely to make landfall on the Andhra Pradesh coast between Nellore and Machilipatnam on Tuesday morning as a severe cyclone storm, with maximum sustained wind speeds of 90 km per hour to 100 km per hour, gusting to 110 km per hour, the Indian Meteorological Department said on Sunday. A red alert has been issued in parts of Tamil Nadu, Chennai, Tiruvallur, Kanchipuram, and Chengalpattu districts, which are expected to be lashed by a heavy downpour over the next two days. Extremely heavy rainfall is also expected in parts of coastal Andhra Pradesh, Yanam, and Rayalaseema, and a storm surge of more than a meter above the tide is likely to inundate the state's southern coastal district at the time of landfall. PM tax PM takes stock. Prime Minister Narendra Modi spoke to Andhra Pradesh Chief Minister Jagan Mohan Reddy on Sunday to take stock of rescue and relief preparations and assured him of the Union government's support. Both affected states have deployed disaster response teams and set up relief camps, evacuating hundreds from the low-lying areas. Fishermen have been warned to stay away from the sea, and preparations are being made to protect the paddy harvest. Trains have been cancelled in the region, and school will be shut on Monday in the affected districts. The coastal districts of Nellore, Tirupati, Prakasam, Baptala, Guntur, Krishna, and West Godavari are likely to face damage due to inundation from an expected storm surge of about 1 to 1.5 meters above the astronomical tide of on Tuesday. Mr. Reddy directed officials to take all possible efforts to minimize the loss of life and property due to the cyclone. He sought foolproof relief and rescue measures, instructing officials to make sure all facilities such as drinking water, food, and necessary medicines are provided in the relief camp. Holds review. Tamil Nadu Chief Minister M.K. Stalin visited the emergency operations centers in the Chennai on Sunday to review precautionary measures. A total of 685 individuals have been evacuated to 11 relief camps in Chengalpattu, Chennai, Kanchipuram, and Tiruvallur district, he said. Over 500 personnel from the state and national disaster response forces have been rushed to Chengalpattu, Chennai, Kodalur, Kanchipuram, and Mayiladuthurai, Nagapattinam, Tiruvallur, Villupuram district. Next article है India disability inclusion and the power of BY. Disability as an identity and entity exists at the intersection of multiple vulnerabilities social, economic, and gender, with each facet requiring careful consideration when conceptualizing action for equity. Globally, 1.3 billion people, which is equivalent to nearly the entire population of India, live with some form of disability. Of them, 80% live in developing countries, further 70% of them live in rural areas. Current systems are designed for persons without disabilities and end up being exclusionary to people with disabilities, resulting in them experiencing higher instances of poverty, lack of access to education and opportunities, informality, and other forms of social and economic discriminations. According to English Dictionary, for a for is often used when a person is receiving something, and by is to identify the agent performing an action. This difference is crucial when it comes to disability inclusion, as the approach is completely different if it is by persons with disabilities being a part of the process and not for them without them in the process. A case for inclusion. At the outset, the inclusion of persons with disabilities into the economy can help boost global GDP between 3% to 7% as per the study by International Labour Organization ILO. The price of inclusion. The economic consequences of excluding people with disabilities from the world of work. We believe that everyone has the right to equal treatment and opportunity at the work, agnostic of any attributes other than the abilities to do the job. The reality, however, is mixed. The current employment scenario is limited, providing fewer job for persons with disabilities and perpetuating stereotypes that create further barriers for people with disabilities to access the labor market. It is also in direct contravention of the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with disabilities, which advocates changing attitudes and perceptions towards a person with disabilities and viewing inclusion from a social development dimension. Disability inclusion is rooted in assuring the rights of persons with disabilities and recognizing the economic benefits of inclusion. Greater challenges in rural areas. In India, the central and state government have various schemes for persons with disabilities and a unique ID for persons with disability UDID card established as part of the Rights of Persons with Disability Act 2016. The first step is awareness to ensure last mile contact connectivity of the benefits enumerated for people with disabilities by the government, which begins with the capacity building of community leaders who can advocate for this at the grassroots level. This is especially important in rural areas where persons with disabilities tend to face greater challenges when compared to their urban counterparts with even more limited access to education and employment. Some developmental schemes to exclude them. They are viewed as objects of charity and not as persons with agency with an ability to participate in decision making processes. Rural areas also have high agricultural dependence and face the highlighted risk of climate calamities arising from rising sea levels, reduced rural areas have also high agricultural dependence and face the highlighted risk of climate calamities arising from the rising sea levels, reduced access to clean water and food, hurricanes, heat waves, and floods, with the rural people at the front lines of these challenges. A bottom up approach to disability inclusion is crucial to build productive pathways out of poverty and ensure that persons with disabilities and are recognized as active members of society and the economy. The private sector holds a key in promoting the employment of persons with disabilities. In addition to a robust legal framework, experience shows the importance of engaging the private sector and building the confidence of companies to hire and retain workers with disabilities. Additionally, engagement of employers federations, including those representing small and medium-sized enterprises as well as with trade unions, has shown to have great potential to promote the employment of persons with disabilities. The Spark project. The ILO and the International Fund for Agricultural Development IFAD in collaboration with the Women's Development Corporation in Maharashtra are implementing the Sparking Disability Inclusive Rural Transformation Spark project. Though through this project, persons with disabilities were put in the lead, being identified from the villages and trained as disability inclusion facilitators. The DIFs engage with the community persons with disabilities, caregivers of persons with disabilities, women from self-help groups, and other stakeholders to raise awarenesses about disability inclusion and barrier to inclusion. The DIF identified women with disabilities and mainstream them in existing self-help groups for social and economic development where these women have been able to access funds to start an enterprises. The Spark project has been able to bring attitudinal shift towards persons with disabilities right from the societal to administrative levels. The goal of social justice cannot be achieved without the inclusion of persons with disabilities in all spheres of development, starting with rural areas and rural resilience. Evidence shows a bi-directional link to poverty, nutrition, and hunger, and as a consequence, there needs to be more inclusive opportunities and employment in rural areas. Given the historic marginalization of persons with disabilities and the backsliding of the process on sustainable development goals, a fundamental shift in commitments, solidarity, financing, and action is critical. It is about time that the voices and needs of persons with disabilities to be prioritized as the center of global development agenda. Next article, India will not be bound by curbs on energy use, says senior officials. India, while being committed to expanding renewable energy, will not bound by restrictions on what kind of energy sources it can or cannot use. Leela Nandan, Secretary Minister of Environment and Forest, told The Hindu on Saturday at COP28. India was conspicuously absent from a list of 118 countries assigned on to a pledge to triple installed renewable energy capacity by 2030. The alliance was odd as India was a proponent of a tripling energy capacity, beginning with a mention in the G20 declaration text this September. No major pledge. India so far has also not signed on to another major pledge signed by 123 countries on Sunday, namely the Declaration on Climate and Health. The latter was a precursor to the first ever Health Day organized at a climate summit. The declaration encourages government to protect communities and prepare healthcare system to cope with the climate-related health impacts such as extreme heat, air pollution, and infectious diseases. Both of these texts through still draft and far from having legal sanctity link climate and health goals to restricting fossil fuel emissions. The draft of the Global Renewable and Energy Efficiency Pledge as of today says renewables deployment must be accompanied in this decade by a rapid increase of energy efficiency improvement and the phase down of unabated coal power, in particular ending the continued investment in unabated new coal-fired power plants. Unabated coal power refers to running coal plants without technology that stores and captures carbon. Negligible contributions. Nudges to sun coal power run contrary to India's long-standing position that it needs to rely on its largest source of energy, coal power, to rapidly improve living standards for the mass of its population. India has also reiterated its right to use coal on the grounds that its historical contribution to the carbon crisis has been negligible, as below global average per capita emissions of 4%. Health impacts. The Climate Health Declaration, according to an accompanying press statement from the COP presidency, mentions the need to reduce the health impacts of climate change beyond the health sector and include new initiatives to drive rapid decarbonization to reduce emissions. India's discomfort lies in linking the objective of this declaration to cutting specific categories of emissions. We need cold storage for storing vaccines and medicines, and these are linked to making our healthcare system resilient. However, suggestions that using these are contributing to climate emissions and that we must choose some fuel over the other are not acceptable, said Mrs. Nandan. Though it is still early days in COP28 negotiations, which is expected to last at least until December 12 this year, India would be constructive but not at the cost of denying energy access to those at the margins of development, she added. According to India's latest communication to the United Nations, its greenhouse gas emissions increased 4% from 2016-19 to 2.6 billion tons of CO2. The energy sector contributed the most to the overall anthropogenic emission 75.81%, followed by the agriculture sector 13.44%, industrial process and product use IPPU sector 8.41%, and waste 2.34%. The next article is Israel orders people to evacuate as bombing shift to southern Gaza. Israel's military ordered more areas in and around Gaza's second largest city of Khan Yunis to evacuate on Sunday, followed by heavy bombardment as it shifted its offensive to the southern half of the territory, where it asserts that leaders of Hamas militant groups are hiding. Palestinians in Gaza said they were running out of a place to go. The Gaza Strip bordering Israel and Egypt is sealed. Many of the territories 2.3 million people are crammed in the south after Israel ordered civilians to leave the north in the early days of the war, sparked by the October 7 attack by Hamas and other militants that killed about 1,200 people, mostly civilians in southern Israel before the latest evacuation order. United Nations monitors said the areas told to evacuate made up about one quarter of the territory. Heavy bombardment was reported overnight into Sunday around Khan Yunis and the southern city of Rafah, as well as parts of the north that had been the focus of Israel's shattering air and ground offensive. Juliet Toma, director of communication at the United Nations Agency for Palestinian Refugees, said nearly 9,58,000 displaced people were in 99 United Nations facilities in the southern Gaza Strip. United Nations Human Rights Chief Volker Turk urged an end to the war, saying civilians' suffering was too much to bear. Hopes for another temporary truce were fading. A week-long ceasefire that expired on Friday had facilitated the release of a dozen of around 240 Gaza-held Israeli and foreign hostages in exchange for Palestinian imprisoned by Israel, but Israel has called its negotiators home. We call we will continue the war until we achieve all its goals, and it's impossible to achieve those goals without the ground operation, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said on Saturday evening. The health ministry in Hamas-ruled Gaza said Sunday the overall death toll in the strip since October 7 had surpassed 15,500, a sharp jump from the previous count of more than 13,300 on November 20. Next, India agreed to withdraw troops from Mali, says Moizu after meeting Modi. India has agreed to the request by the new Maldives governments to withdraw about 75 Indian military persons stationed on the island to work on humanitarian operation. Maldives President Mohammad Moizu claimed on Sunday. The statement comes 2 days after he met Prime Minister Narendra Modi on the sidelines of COP28 climate summit in Dubai. The move raised by Mr. Moijo during his India Out election campaign will come as a disappointment for New Delhi, which has been urging the Maldives to look at the utility of Indian personnel on the island nation in the proper perspective. The Indian government has assured the people of Maldives that it will respect their decision regarding the withdrawal of Indian troops from Maldives. The Maldives President's office wrote in a tweet quoting from Mr. Moiju's press conference earlier in the day. Government sources countered Mr. Moiju's claim, saying the talks were still ongoing and that the core group announced after the Modi-Moiju meet would look into all aspects of whether the 75 Indian naval persons should stay or not. MEA silent. The Ministry of External Affairs did not comment on the development. However, sources said that the issue of Indians personnel that work on humanitarian assistance and disaster relief programs was briefly discussed when the leaders met in Dubai. Significantly, the issue had not been mentioned directly in the readouts issued by the governments at the end of talks between Mr. Modi and Mr. Moiju. On Friday, Mr. Moiju's statement on Sunday indicates, however, that he is not willing to budge on his demand. The Indian personal issue has been a continuous one since Mr. Moiju won presidential election in October, ousting from former President Ibu Soli, who was seen as more India friendly. The next is the transformative benefits of population level genome sequencing. ये साइंस का पेज है. In the last decade, genomics has undergone a revolutionary shift with the advent of technologies that have significantly improved throughout and reduced the cost of whole genome sequencing, giving rise to population-scale genome sequencing program where scientists decipher the complete genetic makeup of large population, offering unprecedented insights into the intricate view and tapestry of human diversity. This week, the United Kingdom announced the completion of 500,000 whole genome sequencing, almost 0.7% of its population. Such data sets are transformative with far-reaching implications for both immediate and long-term advancement in the biological sciences. The Decode Initiative, an early effort to use large-scale population genetic studies, was initiated in Iceland by Decode Genomics in 1996, with most of the islandic population enrolling for genetic studies in ground. In around a decade's time, the initiatives, along with the democratizing democratization of sequencing technology, provided the initial impetus for programs with that wished to use population scale genomic data for precision medicine and public health. The decode efforts considerably improved our understanding of the genetics of disease and the utility of such data in risk assessment. It also contributed significantly to the methods, infrastructure, and standards with which researchers handle large-scale genomic data and set up discussions on their bioethics. The project also laid the groundwork to integrate medical records and people's genealogies, resulting in new drugs and therapeutics. Decode's success plus the wider availability of sequencing technology gave rise to a number of population-scale genome initiatives around the world, including many pilot programs initiated in the last decade. At first, several projects worked with hundreds to thousands of genomes, but in the last half a decade, such endeavors have leapfrogged to lakhs of genomes. The metric of population scale efforts, indeed, one of the first such was UK's 100,000 genome project, which aimed to bring genomics into routine healthcare. We estimate more than a dozen countries today have genome programs of a lakh genomes or more. A recent initiative by the pharmaceutical companies Regeneron Genetics, Central AstraZeneca, Novo Nordisk, and Ruche, along with the Meharry Medical College, Tennessee, has even planned to sequence more than 5 lakh individuals of African ancestry through the Diversity Human Genome Initiative. Many large-scale genome programs are currently underway, including the ALF US program in the US, which will collect the genetic information of a million people with funding from the National Institute of Health. The European Union recently launched the 1 plus million genomes initiatives. A 3 million African genome is also currently in the works, as is the Emirati Genome Program's scheme to sequence more than a million samples. More than 4 lakh, 4 lakh have already been completed. Population scale genome efforts have significantly diverse objectives. Many programs take advantages of a unique population composition to understand disease prevalence and biomarkers for diseases, and use that to inform the discovery of novel therapeutics targets of other efforts to seek to build scalable public health initiatives where genomic data is used in decision making and medical care. For example, according to one estimate, 18.5% of the UK's 100K initiatives was actionable, translating to direct healthcare benefit to participants. The cost of whole genomic sequencing is also falling in tandem together with a growing body of evidence as to the data's usefulness. It is entirely possible that a significantly large number of humans around the world will have their whole genome sequenced in their lifetime in the coming decade, as well as a similarly significantly large number of people being able to access information derived from sequencing data for routine diagnostic workups. Of course, just as population scale programs open new doors, they also confront new challenges, especially with regard to ethics of and the access to these genomes and the discoveries that build on them. There are also significant concerns regarding the equitable representation and access to the fruits of discoveries. Example: over-representation of certain ethnic groups in population scale data sets. Countries like the US have also proactively created regulatory frameworks to prevent the misuse of genetic data, such as to prevent insurance and employment discrimination using the terms of Genetic Information Non-Discrimination Act. Genomes from India. Asia and India are not far off vis-a-vis population level sequencing either. The Genome Asia project, led by multiple partners across the continent, plans to sequence a lakh whole genome from the diverse population. An initial pilot data set with whole genomes of 1739 individuals belonging to 19 population groups in 64 countries was published in the Nature in 2019. A pilot program for population genomes in India named Indigen provided an early review of more than a thousand genomes of individuals from cosmopolitan areas in India. It also yielded some clues to the landscape of many treatable genetic diseases and variants of clinical significance, including the efficacy and toxicity of drugs and the prevalence of rare disorders. A larger program to sequence 10,000 whole genome from diverse population groups is in the works under the Genome India initiatives. Looking to the horizon, the long-term impact of population-scale genomics extends beyond the individual's health, shaping our comprehension of human evolution, migration patterns, and adaptation to diverse environments. It will also contribute significantly to our knowledge of human biology. In essence, population scale genomics stands at the forefront of a genomic revolution poised to revolutionize healthcare, illuminate our evolutionary history, and propel us towards a future in which precise personalized approaches will influence the landscape of medical and biological understanding. And just as the day when we will sequence a billion genome in a single project is not far off, the time for an individual acquiring a right to access and understand their own genome sequence is also at hand. Then last आज का जो आर्टिकल है मिथेन मोर पोटेंट लेस persistent. Methane is an organic compound. Its molecule consists of carbon and four hydrogen atoms, CH4. It is in the news of late because of its character as a potent pollutant. While climate talks have by and by and large focused on carbon and carbon dioxide emissions, there is increasing acknowledgement among the world's leaders as well as philanthropists of methane's effects on global warming at the ongoing COP28 climate talks in the United Arab Emirates. For example, a group of well-endowed philanthropic bodies, including the Sequoia Climate Foundation and Bezos Earth Fund, announced that they would collectively invest 450 million dollar in the solution to tackle methane emissions. Methane has greater global warming potential (GWP) than the carbon dioxide. The GWP is a measure of warming caused by a substance relative to that due to the same mass of carbon dioxide. The GWP 100 measures this over a century at a time. If carbon dioxide has a GWP 100 of 1, methane is 28, nitrous oxide is 265, and sulfur hexafluoride is 23,500. However, while carbon dioxide lasts for several decades at a time in the atmosphere before breaking down, methane breaks down in a matter of years. That is, it's a short-lived climate pollutant. Its sources include cattle farming, landfills, wastewater treatment facilities, rice cultivation, and some other industrial processes. So, friends, this is all for today, and we will meet from tomorrow onwards with new news articles from the Hindu newspaper, which are relevant from UPSC perspectives. So, till then, thank you, thanks a lot, and keep studying.